Hi, everyone. It's Howard Gearhauser. On the line, you have my dad, Dr. Richard Gearhauser, aka Dr. G. In today's episode, we're going to go through a really important topic, and this is around U.S. healthcare and how it compares to healthcare in other countries around the world. As many of you might know, the U.S. spends a whole lot of money on healthcare, but how is that relating to our health? Are we doing better or worse than the other countries? So, Dad, I'm going to pass it over to you. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what's going on in terms of the healthcare in the United States?
Yes, uh, healthcare in the United States costs a lot of money. And of course,
Hold on. Will you
what,
get yourself a little more centered in your camera?
centered?
You're kind of low on it.
What do you mean?
Like get your head closer to the,
Like that?
yeah, that's good right there.
Okay.
You can go.
Yes. So the United States spends a lot of money on healthcare. I mean, we all know that drugs are expensive, that going to the hospital is expensive, that having procedures is expensive. And we like to think in America, we have the most advanced medical system in the world because we spend so much money on it. So, it's interesting to see, are we any healthier because of this outrageous spending? Now, one of the things I came across was on a Twitter of Dr. Eric Topol, who's out of the San Diego, La Jolla area. And he posted a graph that I saw this. There are similar graphs, but this graph had the very latest that we've described a lot, that the very latest over the last 3 years, that United States average life expectancy has been going down, which was kind of a shock to everyone because it's been gradually going up, but it's going down. So this graph included that latest data, which I hadn't seen before, and seeing it in a graphic description is pretty powerful. So we want to take a look at that. And
Yeah, so I'm going to actually pull up the graph right now. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube or Facebook, you'll obviously get to see the graph. For those of you who are listening to the audio on our podcast, we'll do our best of describing what we're talking about in the graph. I'll also include a link to it in the description of the podcast if you want to go reference this later. So here is the graph. Can you see that, Dad?
yes.
So what's this graph showing us?
Okay, so look at this graph. And here we have life expectancy. And then on the bottom axis, we have the healthcare expenditure per person. So per person expenditure, you can see a bunch of countries grouped up to the upper left of the graph. And that, starts with Chile as having, and this then correlates to Chile has the lowest per capita healthcare spending, and then these other countries are grouped around that. So as we go out to the right, it gets more expensive. And the last country that has good life expectancy but spends quite a bit is Switzerland. So Switzerland spends, looks like about $6,000, a little more, $6,000 per year per person on healthcare. And they have a life expectancy of 83. The highest life expectancy on this graph is Japan, who spends about $4,000 per capita per year, $4,000, equivalent of US dollars. And they have the longest life expectancy, which is a little over, right between 83 and 84 years on average. So the bottom of the graph, which is the lowest life expectancy, and this is of the countries that are considered economically advantaged, we have by far the highest costs. So the cost in the US per year in 2018 is $11,000 a year. Okay, so that's almost double Switzerland. And it's Chile, it's like about 7 times more than Chile, which has a better life expectancy over 81 years than the United States. So the United States life expectancy is just slightly over 78 years old. So we have dramatically lower life expectancy and dramatically higher spending. Okay, so I think you can look at this and go, something's wrong in America. So Americans thinking that we have the best healthcare system in the world with all the advanced technology and all the great new drugs, because many of the drugs, in fact, most of the drugs in the world are developed in the United States. Why is that? Because of our laws. Our laws protect patents. So if you develop a drug, you can have a monopoly on selling the drug. So drugs typically cost, maybe $5 a pill or $10 a pill, even though they might be just pennies to make. Like Prozac, many, many years ago, probably before a lot of you were born, but Prozac, cost pennies to make, and the markup was thousands of times. So you think of, like a farmer sells a tomato, their costs of growing it, well, they mark it up maybe double. Okay, but here, the drug companies, because they have a monopoly, they can mark it up thousands of times. Okay, and the monopolies are allowed because of our laws. So it's a system that I think has not worked out so good. And that's why you're seeing what you see.
So the healthcare, being that drugs and surgery are kind of things that almost everyone seems to be pushed onto, we have this really low life expectancy compared to the other economically advantaged countries. So like, let's look at someone like Chile or Japan. What are they doing that's lowering their healthcare costs but increasing their life expectancy? Is there something they're doing other than not pushing as many drugs that's helping them live so long?
Well, I think there's multiple factors, so it's going to be hard to drill down to one thing. I would say some of the uh, poorer nations, like let's say Chile, they're probably closer to nature. That's just my opinion, that they're closer to nature and they're doing things like getting outside, and a lot of their workforce works outside and things like that. That could be part of it. Another part of it is socialized medicine can lower the cost because they don't have maybe the same laws where you can just increase the price of a drug thousands of times, thousands of percent. And that is often the case. Like here in the United States, you may have a drug that's extremely expensive and find out that you can buy it for a quarter of the price in Canada, because Canada doesn't allow them to price gouge. But the United States, again, because of our laws, and then because of our system of having big corporations lobby our federal regulators and our Congress and the people that pass the laws, we just have all these systems in place that create these exorbitant prices. But still, even though we spend more, we still don't live as long. So this system definitely is broken from any way, shape, or form you can look at it. We don't live as long. We pay much more for it. And then we think about our system, how much bureaucracy is in the system. So the percentage that goes to bureaucratic costs in our healthcare system is typically much higher than other countries. But getting back to the drugs, I think a good example is a drug like Lipitor. So Lipitor was that famous cholesterol-lowering drug. It was introduced in 1997, and it happened to be introduced the same year that they allowed drug companies to advertise their drugs on television. And that's probably no accident, and why Lipitor became the biggest selling drug, the biggest grossing drug, well over $100 billion. I mean, think of all the yachts that bought the executives of this company. One drug company, over $100 billion. It's pretty incredible. But Lipitor came out, and it came out when the TV ads were allowed. So that saturated that market. That made that particular drug just boom. Plus, they convinced every doctor they would, pay for doctors to go to Hawaii to listen to how wonderful Lipitor was. They hired the greatest minds in cardiology and lipidology to give lectures and do research studies. They funded hundreds and hundreds of research studies on Lipitor. They studied Lipitor for so many conditions. It's funny, none of those panned out. But the one it did pan out, at least statistically, and even this is questioned today because they buried studies that didn't pan out. So the drug company has the power, since they're paying for the studies and all the people doing the studies are employees, they can bury things that don't go in their favor. And I believe, and there's books written about this that you can read about how and even today, the data on the statins, in other words, the studies they did, they do not make that data public. They don't let you get to it. So it can be reanalyzed and go, did you guys analyze this data right? But they found an improvement in mortality in patients that had had a heart attack already. And if you put them on Lipitor and lower their cholesterol, then they had fewer heart attacks and they had improved mortality, if you can believe their studies, which is a big question. But many other studies, and they would have loved to put the whole population on it. In fact, some of the protocols recommend that more people after the age of 60 should be on the statin-lowering drugs or the cholesterol-lowering drugs than not. So that if we follow the protocol of the experts, which typically are these same people that are on the staff of the drug companies, they get speaking fees or their research is paid for or whatever. So they are biased. They shouldn't be making any kind of recommendations to the public. But they recommend their algorithms, which become the standard of care. So the standard of care is the law in every state. In other words, a physician needs to follow the standard of care in their community. And the standard of care is to follow the algorithm that, if you have a patient over 60 and their cholesterol is even normal, but they're at an elevated risk for cardiovascular disease, they should be on the drug. That's the algorithm. But the algorithm is written by people with a conflict of interest. So we have a messed up system that would put most of the country on a drug like this. Now, lowering your cholesterol, well, there's studies showing that a lower cholesterol leads to more depression. A lower cholesterol leads to you're more likely to die. A lower cholesterol makes you more prone to ending up with a violent death. In other words, getting involved in violence and getting killed, shot or committing suicide is increased. So there are several studies showing that mortality is increased when you have a low cholesterol. And yet we were convinced, I was convinced as a young physician, that if I had a patient who had a cholesterol of 150, a total cholesterol of 150, we would applaud them. Yay! You are such a light. You won the genetic lottery. Well, that person was increased risk of suicide, homicide, depression. And then we find that the higher your cholesterol as you age, like over 60, where we want most of our population on statin drugs, if we believe the biased experts, then we shorten our lifespan. There's been many studies show that the higher your cholesterol is after you're older, the longer you live. So I think this graph just kind of puts everything in perspective. I'm not saying I know the exact reason of why the US has such a bad placement on this graph. As I say, it's multiple factors, and it could be something as simple as we just have the corporations gone wild. They can just charge whatever they want because they have a monopoly. And Lipitor, the monopoly is only supposed to last originally when they wrote this law, the monopoly is only supposed to last 7 years. Well, Viagra's been going on for over 30 years and they still have their monopoly. So these companies have learned how to bend the laws and get out of having to comply to the 7-year law. Lipitor extended theirs. They didn't comply to 7 years. They finally went off patent. So they started in 1997. They went off patent in 2011. So they got 4 extra years of making $12 billion a year. That's how much they're making at their peak. $12 billion a year. And I just cringe when I think of if we went back to the things that we promote, like we did a video recently on our top 10 things that we think you should do to improve your health. If that money went to promoting that $12 billion, can you imagine? And yeah, this is my intuition and this is my guess, but we would get 100 times the benefit. And so it's sad that we invest all this money. Yes, it paid for a lot of yachts for, executives and, and vacation homes for executives. And, that is what it is. And also paid for a lot of low-level jobs for a lot of, research assistants and all this. So I'm not saying individuals didn't help their lives with this money, but I'm just thinking of how much better it would have gone if we would have got to the root cause of why we have problems. And so a high cholesterol is not really a problem. And that's a problem with our system, is we don't look to the root. So that, the root of heart disease, isn't high cholesterol. It's having a bad diet, having a bad environment, being stressed out, all these things combined. Sometimes it's genetic, so there's, again, multiple issues going on.
Yeah, and if you're on this medication or on prescription medication, it doesn't mean like you go throw your pills in the toilet. You very well might need to be on that, and you don't want to just stop taking it because there could be adverse side effects. But what you do want to start doing is incorporating those free things that we talk about in that video that my dad mentioned, our 10 best protocols that your doctor will never tell you about. Because these things aren't profit driven. This is getting back to nature. This is getting back to ancient wisdom. This is looking at the latest science and technology and figuring out how that can be integrated with nature and ancient wisdom. When you just rely on prescription drugs and you don't look at the full picture, that can be problematic. And I think that's a big reason why the US is so low on that list, even though we're spending all this money. We've kind of thrown out the nature part. We've thrown out the ancient wisdom part because there's not a profit incentive for recommending those things. As my dad mentioned, if we put all of our focus into getting back to nature, getting back to the way human beings were designed, getting back to ancient traditions that have been proven effective for thousands of years, we might not be in this health crisis that we are now. So rather than worrying about what the prescription drugs might do to you or worrying about being a lemming in this healthcare system, be proactive and start incorporating those 10 protocols. There's other ones too, but those 10 are a good place to start because they're pretty easy. They're things that you can start implementing right away, and it makes a big difference. So you don't have to be a part of this population where the life expectancy is going down and continues to go down. You can really take control of it. And it's not just about living forever either. It's health span. You want to be healthy as you get older, not on a concoction of drugs, doing a bunch of surgeries, and really being miserable till your dying day. So start doing those things. I'll put a link to that video in the description. Go watch that. It's about an hour long, but it's pure content. Our motivation is to help you guys have practical steps, most of which are completely free because nature provides them. Go do those. Then you don't need to be the $11,000 per person per year spent on healthcare. We've bought into this completely. Yeah, we'll go see the doctor if we really, really need to, but it's not like let's go get our biannual checkup just so we can be put on drugs or, offered vaccinations or whatever the thing is. Do these other things and your health is going to be a lot better for incorporating those. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, Howard, can you pull up that graph again?
Yeah, one
What I
sec.
would like to, Howard just mentioned this, but so, and I mentioned it as well, but look how the United States life expectancy is going down since 2014. So life expectancy is now dropping. And you can see that was for the first time since they've been keeping track of this. And that, um, way back in 1970 and 1975, life expectancy was dramatically rising. And I think this is, partly because of our healthcare system. You can see this was happening worldwide. So it wasn't our super duper special system that caused this. Our life expectancy was going up just like the other countries. Now, the other countries, you can see their life expectancy is still going up. All of these countries, it's still going up. Some are plateauing, but the United States is unique in that it's dropping. So I think we are definitely the most drugged country of all these countries. And I think you can see that maybe that is not the answer. And that's why we're so passionate about getting this message out, because when life expectancy is going down, you're doing something wrong. And, could be a lot of different things, but I think the key is not being cognizant of these environmental factors that we focus on that are the key to health. And the new science, the science in physics, the science in biology, the science in genetics and epigenetics and the microbiome, and all these advances that are just incredible advances in science are lagging behind our physicians. Our physicians learn about the new drug. So the new drugs nowadays, a lot of times they're recalled 5 years later because they kill you or they have a side effect that's just unacceptable. So the FDA takes them off the market, but not until a lot of people are harmed. Now, I'm not the only one that says this. There's people in academia that are saying when a new drug comes out, and it's typically extremely expensive, it typically doesn't perform any better than the other drugs that are out there. And a lot of times, because it's so new and maybe because it's so powerful for your physiology, that it's more likely to have side effects that are unacceptable. So I would almost recommend not, they're talking today like President Trump has said, well, we're going to let people have drugs that aren't even FDA approved because, that's going to be some magical thing that the FDA is holding up all these drugs that could save us. No, we've not had a magical drug, or extremely rarely had a magical drug that cures anything except antibiotics. So you look at all the Alzheimer's drugs, so much money's involved. If you could find an Alzheimer's drug that reverses the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, but they can't find it. They've been spending billions of dollars to try to find this, but their drugs really are a failure. Maybe they'll find one someday, but if it's a new drug, as I say, chances are probably 4 out of 5, and that's what this one professor wrote an article about that recently, that it is likely to not be any more effective than the drugs that are already out there, and is more likely to have an adverse effect. So the new drugs, even though they're good for the drug companies because they can make their billions of dollars for 5 years before it's taken off the market, or before the black box warnings are posted, because we have enough time to see how toxic it is. And the reason is they're affecting our natural physiology by blocking something. And our natural physiology was created by our creator or evolution for a reason. You can't just block it. There's a whole system, and everything in that system is interconnected. So you can't just cut something off and expect it to cure something. It just doesn't happen. And that's why we don't have a cure for diabetes, obesity, other than cutting you open and tying bands around your stomach. They think that's good, but those people have, to me, unacceptable side effects. When you go and put an artificial band around your stomach or cut part of your stomach out or reroute your intestine to bypass part of it, that's not a smart thing to do. That's messing with Mother Nature. And you know what happens when you mess with Mother Nature?
Exactly. So this doesn't have to seem so daunting, getting healthy. I know when you look at these numbers, it's like we're totally screwed. It's really not. You just need a new approach. You need a new perspective. Get back to Mother Nature. Like I mentioned, we give you all of this information for free because it's our mission and our purpose to help humanity get out of this health crisis. So go do those things. We're not charging anything for it. If you are someone who wants more of a personalized plan or maybe even wants to work with my dad and myself to help you get your health back on track, I'll include a link so you can learn about how those programs work. If that's not something you're interested in, just implement the free stuff. We're not holding anything back. That's our mission. So take advantage of it. Go do it. Go check out those links. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, I think this, to me is very valuable that people are putting out these graphs like Dr. Topol. I think he's helping everyone realize we got to make some changes. The trouble is the mainstream system, the medical organizations in this country are not on the same page as I am, or as Howard is, or as you probably are. You wouldn't be watching this. So getting on the page with, okay, I want to get to the root. I want to be healthy and happy because I'm doing things in congruency with how I was designed.
Well, we appreciate the time. Thanks for the time, Dad. And make sure to tune in to our next episode. We're doing these on a daily basis. We have a lot of information to share, and we got to get it out there on the internet. So please share this with someone you love if you found it valuable, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.